ATG Radio. We are the greatest show. Rank numero uno. ATG Radio.
One of the all-time greats in professional wrestling, Mr. Nick Bockwinkel, join us on ATG Radio tonight. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Good, sir. How about yourself?
Excellent. We really appreciate your time to come on the show this evening. You know, myself, Rufus, and Tim Cudgis, we've been tremendous fans of yours and for, you know, what you've done for the sport and what you continue to do for professional wrestling. You know, got to commend you for it. But, you know, first and foremost, how have you been and what have you been up to lately?
Trying to beat my wife at golf. That's on the luxury, on the leisure side. And trying to just stay in a little shape and be a nice, good citizen.
Well, that's good. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, let the callers know you're actually enjoying yourself, I guess, playing golf in the Las Vegas area right now. How's that going for you?
Oh, not too bad. Except, like I say, I'd like to, of course, every golfer in the world likes to shoot better than he does.
And if your wife got you beat, if Mrs. Bockwinkel has your number, then there's something wrong, man. You got to keep getting out there. I guess I don't know if you have to lift weights. I don't know if it requires weightlifting to golf. I don't think I got to that point yet. But, you know, regardless here, you know, we wanted to, you know, speak to you and kind of pay homage to what you've done. You know, most recently, you, as of right now, you are the president of the Cauliflower Alley Club, and most recently in Vegas, you had the convention. And how's that? I mean, I may have it worded wrong. We don't have, like, notes of everything going on with that, but how's everything going as far as that? I mean, I like that as far as a tribute to many of the greats that have been in the sport of professional wrestling.
That's the one great thing as far as I'm concerned about especially the Cauliflower Alley Club. It gives the opportunity for all of the us old codgers to come in and hug each other and look at each other and say, well, you think you could go 20 minutes, type thing, and we would all tell a lie real quick.
But, you get back into it, and, you see what's going on in wrestling today. And, guys like yourself and, many other the greats that I'm sure you still keep in contact with or have known have done, made it their job, even when they were all spending time with their family to protect the business. And basically that shield, as far as the wrestling business goes, has been, let go. There's no shield. Everybody just has the sword. There's no defense anymore to protect what was. Well,
let's put it this way. If you were a halfway intelligent human being and had some moxie, you understood what was taking place. And going down the road, somebody says, well, that stuff's all phony. And I say, then let me give you a phony body slam. And I says, right here, right now. I mean, and especially if it's such as you say, then God bless, it's not going to hurt at all. And when I just approach them with a little humbleness of that stature, and in fact, I have to take my hat off to so many. WrestleMania. About two of them back, I remember watching Shawn Michaels run across the ring, dive over the top rope onto the
Undertaker.
Undertaker, yeah. So you undoubtedly saw the match, but still, for a 275, 80-pound man to take that kind of a chance with his body, there's not a damn thing at all phony about that and these are not stuntmen that are doing this. These are flesh and blood human beings, and so for them to entertain you and take those kind of chances, I take my hat off to them.
Anyway, actually, you know, and you mentioned that there. I mean, don't get me wrong. The stuff is it's entertainment now, which is what they have out there. But
it was entertainment then.
Oh, it's always. I didn't mean to say with there. You know, that's the one thing now is, you know, you were a guy who was also prided on, you know, his in-ring ability as well as, you know, hyping up the match with the promos before and after,
sure.
And that's what got you excited. You looked the part. You know, many guys say basically on the independent circuit don't look the part, but you had it. You had, and you know, you still do. You have the movie star looks. You know, you were in shape. And, you know, that was the one thing about Nick Bockwinkel. And this was the thing is, you know, you were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And I actually remember, I'm 31, I actually remember if it was the Philadelphia Spectrum or it was the Madison Square Garden, you joined the broadcast table. And, you know, I guess because your relationship with Bobby Heenan, I thought they were going to rekindle that. You were getting ready to come into the WWF at the time. This was around the Hogan era, and it never came to fruition.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Whatever happened with that? Because that, you know, again, what you've done for AWA, I mean, if you think about it now, there was the AWA, one of the greatest, I mean, wrestling promotions. I mean, the biggest names came from there. You know, there was the two big names, the guys that defined it was Vern Gagne and yourself. You know, after your era, they tried, I guess, with Kurt Hennig, rest in peace. But, you know, you and Vern were the guys that basically mold what wrestling should have been. And, you know, what WWE, WWF had done, I do not discredit that for nothing. But for myself, I was always a fan of the guys that you can look up to or you can love, you can hate, and you can believe. You know, if you walk in there, if I see Nick Bockwinkel on the street, I'm going to say this guy is going to belittle me with his, you know, with his arrogance and with his cockiness because his ability inside the ring. And not just that, you know, I would be afraid as a child, as a teenager, as an adult, that you would put me in one of those submission holds or body slam me right on the spot. Yeah. A lot of times there's a lot of guys out there that you can't believe. You know, you watch the TNA. You know, I'm not going to say I'm a big guy. I'm 5'9". I'm in pretty decent shape. But, you know, there's guys that are about my size, maybe smaller. I'm not going to believe these guys are going to kick my ass in a wrestling match or in a street fight whatsoever.
I think this is, of course, one of the kind of, in a sense, a certain misconception that those who were always fans always kept saying, "Oh shit, I could kick him. I could kick his butt, or I could nail him pretty good if he didn't see me coming." And you know, and I mean, and just and they always wanted to be one step up a little bit better, and that's one of the reasons why I figured, as far as my interviewing goes, I knew that I was going to use that layer of intelligence because these guys, they were all blithering idiots to a certain extent, and so if I felt that I could kind of put them in their place, that was fine with me, you know, and it was the nature of the beast, you know, so. It was fun.
Now, I would have passed. We got Rufus Defabel. I mean, he's a big, tremendous part of the show. One of the co-hosts on the show. I mean, he has basically a novel. I mean, he's you know sitting there. He's got kind of starstruck right now just being on the phone. But I just want to ask you a question. And I mean, I currently reside in Las Vegas as well. You know, I don't get the opportunity to have the enjoyment of a hometown professional sports team. You know, there's the UNLV Rebels and stuff like that. And then, you know, every now and then you get WWE will come in town and they'll go to the Thomas and Mack Center or the Orleans building that they have there. Any wrestling circuits, and I remember, and it's still on ESPN Classics today. You know, you could still see your matches on the AWA wrestling from when they were holding shows in Las Vegas, and some of that's surreal because I don't know about the casino. I guess it was you guys had it at the Stardust. I'm
trying to think where because it changed. We had it at a couple of different places, and I forget what the Showboat, was it?
Showboat, that's it. Yeah. I know it's still standing in Atlantic City, not Vegas anymore. But in your case, I know I've seen pictures of you. I've seen a picture of you with Rikishi at I guess an independent wrestling card that was out here in Vegas. The one thing, as far as for the listeners, and we get a lot of listeners out here in the Vegas area. Do you get an opportunity? Because for one, I have no idea what's going on out here. I mean, I was contacted by some of the wrestling promotions, indie promotions out there. But for somebody like yourself, is there any game in town as far as Las Vegas for wrestling fans?
As far as wrestling, only I guess when the WWE comes in. You know, so for all intents and purpose, so I would have to say, no, there really isn't. You know. But you know, I mean, it's that's the nature of the beast. So it'd be nice if you know. I mean, when you stop and think about it, the air of when we used to be here in Vegas, the AWA did, and all of the territorial functions that took place. It was a different air, and to a certain extent, I think I kind of maybe preferred it better over to what we have today. And yet, every promoter that's on the face of the earth right now would have wanted to do exactly what Vince has done, and and if this is what every one of them wanted to do, and it happened and finally took place in television. I mean, you know, I mean, you see how many shows, how many things are on TV now, and so it was eventually going to be something where this all came to pass, and it was and so I have to say that. I can't deny that what Vince did was wrong. Not at all. Not at all.
Oh no, you know, again, I don't blame any of that stuff. I mean, it's still there. He's still the main game. You know, you've been a part of some of the stuff that WWE has been doing. I remember you on a Monday Night Raw episode, and it was good to see you on there. I don't know, about a year, maybe 2 years ago. And, you know, even, again, you being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So I guess, you know, you're still active when the time is right as far as wrestling goes. I mean, they're the big game. They honored you as far as the Hall of Fame. But do you ever make any other appearances at wrestling shows in any capacity?
Yes, I do. But it's not necessarily done with or by Vince or his operation. And yet again, some of it is with his operation. So, and then there's a lot of independents, such as you're talking to me here on the radio. I'll be probably. I've got 2 or 3 different places I got to go, but back east in the country. I mean, back into the Midwest and all the way to the East Coast. And it's there are those fans that still want to see our old bodies. So, but I mean, not in a wrestling capacity, mind you. In an autograph interview type scenario where we sit and we chat with the people, and so that still kind of keeps it alive. And yet the way, so to speak, Vince has been able to formulate it the way it is. God bless him. I would like to say that if the tables were turned and I was put into a promotional position, I would have to say I would have done the same thing.
Now, Mr. Bockwinkel, let me just ask you a question. Does it ever leave you? You know, I know you're at home, you're spending time with your wife, you're enjoying the fruits of life, but does it ever leave you? Do you ever, and I know this is just any guy, but, you were the it guy. Now, do you walk past the mirror and decide, hey, I might want to cut a promo on myself? Do you see a camera and you still got it? Does it ever leave you? Is it always with you every single day?
Yeah, especially when I walk by the mirror, and it depends on what time of the day it is or night, whether I'm going to the bathroom or coming back from, and so it believe me, if there was ever anything that this game had, it was a deliverance of humility to the poor souls. Now, the poor souls I'm talking about are the wrestlers, because they just, you can stand in front of the mirror for how long before you get bored?
You're right. And I was just, that's that one thing. I mean, because in my time before I went to the military, I went to wrestling school. It was my dream to be a wrestler. There was just a lot of obstacles I had to overcome that it didn't turn out that way. But, I'm just saying this because I'm a grown man, married with children. I still have it where I walk down a hallway and I slap the walls. And I know it's kind of funny, but I was just saying, as many years you put into this business, you lived the dream. I can say you were yourself and you were your character, and a lot of my friends have went on to make it to the big show, and they still have it. We get together every now and then and we raise our hands up. We hear music coming out of a car and we pretend we're coming out of the curtain, and I mean, it's stuff like that, as well as with you, and for you to even come out there and say, oh, I went out there, I made my money, I made a living, I'm all done with it, but to even give you so much more respect for still saying it, because you could tell you did exactly what you wanted to do in life, and kudos to you because you put your body on the line for my enjoyment, my friends, my family, and much respect to you, Mr. Bockwinkel, for that, and basically that's my appreciation towards you for the entertainment that you've given me throughout the years.
I appreciate that, and I thank the dear Lord that He gave me the ability to do it. He gave me the ability to use my mouth in possibly a little different capacity than a lot of my cohorts, and it was a very, very wonderful trip. I got to say that, and the little bits of glory that go with it. Whether it's James Cagney, I'm showing my age now all of a sudden, or some big movie star, Rock Hudson, or some of the stars of today. You got to know that.
Well, the only movie stars we know, Nick, are George Clooney, The Rock, and Brad Pitt. All those other guys, we never heard of. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's true. Believe me, nobody would humble you as fast as Bobby Heenan.
Well, there's another guy. Well, I know he has some questions with Bobby the Brain Heenan, but Rufus Defabau is really excited. I mean, the whole show he's been talking about you coming on here. I just want to introduce him to you, Rufus Defabau, to Mr. Nick Bockwinkel. Rufus, are you still with us?
Yes,
okay, there you go, Rufus.
Okay, well, first off, Mr. Bockwinkel, I'd like to welcome you to the show and everything. I appreciate your time coming for us. As I said before, you're one of the all-time greats. I familiarized some of the fans who may not have known you. You've held well over 12 titles throughout your career. You've competed against Bob Backlund, Stan Hansen, Dick the Bruiser, Ray Stevens.
You know, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Since I've been out of it.
Oh, yeah. You know, and countless others, you know.
Yes.
I guess my opening question to you, though, is regardless of all these accomplishments you've done, what has been the greatest accomplishment of your life?
Oh, God, that's hard to say. I've got 2 daughters. So anybody that's a father right now, he definitely takes pride in his children, especially that if they love him like he loves them. Which is very much part of my life with my girls, and my wife, of course, of God knows, well over 30 years. And those are just great accomplishments there. And the best part of it all was, and I have to laugh because when I first met my wife in Hawaii, come to find out that when I got to know her real quick over there, I was wrestling over there for a stretch, and she was my mother-in-law was actually a hardcore wrestling fan. Okay, and yet my wife could care less, was not impressed. It meant nothing to her. The whole macho shtick, you know, as far as she was concerned, was out the window, you know. And that's exactly what I had to have, you know what I mean, because it's hard to see one of the great baseball players only to find out that his mother-in-law was a big fan, and she was just pawing all over him, you know. And my mother and my wife, of course, a few times has had to say to her mother, who's now passed on, she says, just remember, Mother, he's married to me, not you.
That's a story.
And to have your biggest fan be your mother-in-law. Oh my God, no, you don't want that to happen. Baseball, football, wrestling, you name it, it doesn't make any difference. Anybody who's been in that sporting world knows exactly what I'm talking about. And you know, and we roll our eyes up into our head.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to move on from that, you know, and I got my a couple other questions for you. Earlier on the show, we had, was it Charlie Haas, Frank?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we had Charlie Haas on here. We were talking about the state of wrestling as it is today and comparing other federations. Myself as a fan and pretty much a historian of the sport, because I can go back to the days of Martin Burns and Frank Gotch and prior. You know, I know all of them.
That's even a little bit before my dad.
Yeah, you know, Warren was a great wrestler. You know, your dad Warren was a great wrestler from everything I've read of him. I've never seen any film of him, you know, so far. I don't know if there is any film, but I would like to get my hands on that if I could find it. Yeah. You know, we were all talking about how, you know, for certain federations, we're kind of disappointed with the direction that wrestling has gone, that it's become more theater rather than getting bare bones wrestling, you know, where guys are just competing and they're telling the storylines through the ring, you know.
Sure.
Because it's got to a point where I'll pop in tapes, you know, of Buddy Rogers and Antonio Rocca and all them guys, Pat
Sure.
O'Connor and all them, Danny McShane, you know. I'll watch those guys as opposed to the things on television. And the funny thing is my niece and nephews, they're from 5 to 11 years old. They actually prefer the older matches to the stuff on TV. I guess my next question to you is, if you had the choice, if you had the power to do it, what would you do to try to change wrestling, if anything at all?
If I had the power to change wrestling, I think it's very possible what I would do is I would still now you have to, don't forget, first you're going to have the technology that we did not have back then, so that there's no sense in wasting this technology. How fast they can get the cameras to go back, pick something up, or rewind, or whatever it was, and so that they can really dissect the physical aspects of it, and that is one of the good things as far as I'm concerned. Opinion as far as the opinion that I have, and because there's no sense in having all this modern technology and not using it. I mean, I would definitely love to. I mean, I would love there were. I mean, as far as me doing interviews, for instance, when and this is what I happened. There was a wrestler by the name of Lord James Blears. He was English.
Oh, he was great.
And Lord James Blears, he had a manager by the name of Captain Holmes, and Captain Holmes was a legitimate tank commander, a captain of the military, and he was in the Second World War. He was a tank commander, and so that I remembered when I saw him do interviews, people would like to say put him down, the announcers and who and when or whatever, and he would look at him and he'd get his nose up in the air, and of course everybody hates to be spoken to when they're looking down upon us, so to speak, and I thought, I'm going to irritate the shit out of anybody and everybody. And so I took pride in having a little dictionary, so to speak. I used to carry in my bag, and I would if I heard a word that I didn't know, I'd look it up right away. And I just thought of how Captain Holmes was, and Lord Blears was, of course, British, and he was standing there and with a monocle in his eye, the little glass eye look, and I saw how it irritated everybody in the building when the captain spoke. They would actually start to chant so they could drown him out. And and I thought, now that's the power of understanding the mentality of people that are there. And so it's kind of like one time I got a letter from a lady in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she was from the University of Wisconsin, and so I opened the letter up and fan mail, and I happened to read it because it's written relatively legible. And it says, I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Bockwinkel, but you used the phraseology of obsequious sycophant in the wrong text. So I said to myself, and I said, did it irritate you enough that you paid $10 to come down to the arena and see me get my ass kicked? So I took most definitely a more sophisticated approach to the outlook that I had on the fans, and those who adored me, God bless them, that's fine. We'll take them. They can come on board. Those who don't, so be it. And it was actually that intellectual indifference that probably PO'd most of the people who I irritated intentionally.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to move on to my other questions right now. Now, Vern Gagne said many great things about you and named you to have been his greatest opponent of all time in Inside Wrestling's magazine edition of the greatest wrestlers of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Now, you were with Vern Gagne's AWA for, I believe, 2 decades, if not longer.
Just about exactly. You're correct.
My question to you is, what made you and Vern's partnership so special? What made you guys be so loyal to each other for so many years and continue to generate the magic, in the business for such a long period of time?
Well, I'm going to say that, first of all, I commanded his respect. And besides commanding his respect, it was me still looking down at him, and the fact that it PO'd him to a great degree. I would hear this from the scuttlebutt coming out of the other locker room. I used to just try to find ways to aggravate him, and as far as that goes, a lot of the other AWA talent, and most of them came to respect it and me, and it's a nice. If verbally, I can just use a few words, and that irritates the shit out of somebody, well then, those are drops of sweat I don't have to work on.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And then, of course, you come along and you give me Bobby Heenan. And Bobby Heenan, he had been working for Minneapolis Boxing and Wrestling, and also he started down in Indiana, where he wrestled for the Bruiser, and they didn't realize what talent they had there. And Bobby, as far as I'm concerned, and since everybody gives me credit for the success that I had, as far as, I like to bow my head, say thank you, I appreciate that. But once I got rolling, there was a fellow by the name of Ray Stevens, and there was a fellow by the name of Bobby Heenan. And I could not have been more fortunate than any other wrestler in the world to have Bobby Heenan for a manager and Ray Stevens for a partner. I mean, to tell you, if you went and told me, I'm going to give you 2 months to think about who you would want to have as a manager and as a partner, who would it be? And so when these two names came up, there wasn't even a question in my mind, because Bobby Heenan, when you stop and think about it, I could walk across the ring and throw my fist up into the air, and it would irritate people, okay? Bobby Heenan could do it and throw his fist up into the air, and they would take, and they'd want to storm the ring and tear him apart. First of all, because they kind of felt that they could. But he was one little tough SB, let me tell you. There's no question in my mind whatsoever. He would have made people pay a price. And then so that it just to have those two guys, Ray Stevens didn't look tough at all. He looked like a pudgy little overweight, and he was just fantastic. He was just unbelievable in the ring. And for me, even though I was on the road to establishing myself, yet at the same time as I'm sitting here talking to you now, and I have to glance back mentally and realize that I had one of them was my partner, one of them was my manager, and this one that was my partner, or rather my manager, he could take and get in the ring and do it. I mean, he could do it. Bobby Heenan was one of the best wrestlers that was out there, and a lot of people, because they figured he was a manager, that they didn't want to give him that much credit. He deserved that credit. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I agree absolutely. That's one of the many things about Bobby Heenan a lot of people don't realize. He was one of the better. I always try to, because people don't really understand how territories worked back then, but he really was one of the better. I would say as a wrestler, he was one of the better underneath, regional territorial wrestlers there was. He never really got the credit for it, but that man could move really quick in the ring, and he was great. He really was.
Yeah. And I mean, go ahead.
Okay. No, you go ahead, Mr. Bockwinkel. This is your hour, not mine.
I mean, and to have Ray Stevens for a partner. Ray, I knew Ray all the way back into Indianapolis, Indiana, when I was back there in the early '60s, and he and a fellow named Roy Shire, who finally became the promoter in San Francisco, he took and he was sensational at that time, and that's what was so hard for a lot of people to believe. And Ray, like I say, I mean, he believe me, I could take and run my fist up in the air, and people would be pissed at me for having done it like up yours. Ray Stevens would do it, or Bobby Heenan would do it, because they didn't look nearly as impressive, or at least as so to speak as I was, because I was in shape and had a few little muscles on my body. Ray looked like a little delicate little chubby boy, and Bobby Heenan, he didn't look impressive, but these two guys, I mean, it was unbelievable how absolutely outstanding they were. And to have them as my partner and my manager, I was the luckiest SB in the world.
I absolutely agree. There didn't come much better, unless you went with other dynasties like Dory and Terry, and other people like that, Yeah. I'm going to move on to my other questions. I know many fans today, hold the WWE as having the best roster among, wrestling organizations.
Sure.
And they do have a very long history of great talent. But for me, as a fan, it's hard for me to compare today's wrestlers with the guys in the AWA during the 70s. I mean, how could you really argue with this lineup? You had yourself, sir. You had NCAA legend Vern Gagne. You had the world's strongest man, Ken Patera. You had AFL legend Dick the Bruiser would come in, the Olympic gold medalist, the Iron Sheik, You had great characters like Jesse the Body Ventura.
Sure.
Like I said, I can't. You had so many legitimate athletes. It blows my mind how many great talents there were. I guess I wanted your thoughts on some of those men and how it was working alongside, them that great talent pool.
There's nothing wrong with, so to speak, having that great talent, pool of talent, and that is because it's almost like the company you keep. If you keep it with very good, quality, respectable people, you're gonna create quality, respectable results, and that was pretty much. There's no question, and much of that there had a lot to do with a fellow by the name of Wally Carbo. And Wally Carbo was the number one guy in the AWA. And Wally also happened to know my father. And so I became very, very close to Wally. So Wally would come in sometime into the locker room and he'd say, there's a guy that wants to come into the territory, and he'd give me a name, and I would look at him, and he would look at me, and all he wanted to do was just a nod, and he'd say, so-and-so. And I'd just shake my head no, just a little bit. Nobody would even know that I was shaking my head no. And so that was I don't want to say I take credit for that, but I mean, what Wally did is he had the ability to make judgment calls, and he would pick everybody's brain, and that was what all the promoters did. That's what Mr. Vince McMahon Sr. did up into the New York area and down. And he had other, and believe me, even Vince McMahon Sr. never stepped into the ring.
Yeah. I guess one of my big questions, because I was in the business a bit in 2004, 2005, and periodically I still get involved with some people still involved on the indie circuit to this day. And I always would hear stories from some of the old-timer types who would talk about guys like Moose Cholak, saying he was the stiffest guy they ever worked with, and they talked about certain people, having who would pull shoots on each other and everything, or would even I don't know if it was ego or if it was jealousy or anything.
A little of all.
When you had such a talent pool, like I said, with the AWA, I mean, you had the world's strongest man, Ken Patera. You had the Iron Sheik who represented Iran in the Olympics. I mean, was there ever really times where any of you guys tried to show each other up at any time?
If you were a halfway intelligent individual, you picked your moment, picked your spots, and like you say, was there any times where it took place? It would take place, but in a different fashion or in a different way. And so it was interesting to watch. It was a little bit of a dance going on, and so that they just took and hang on a second.
Okay, Mr. Bockwinkel.
No, okay, I'm back.
Okay.
So I mean, what would happen was, you believe me, plenty of egos, and all these egos, Bobby Heenan was the best at slicing and dicing, and the different things he would say to or from or about somebody else. And so you had the promotion, you had the matchmakers, you had the owners, you had the championship people, like Stanley Blackburn from Texas. He owned part of the AWA. Nobody knew that. Didn't need to know that, that's why as soon as there was an alliance of some sort, all of a sudden everybody started coming out of the woodwork, so to speak, and it was you may as well, you had to be on your tiptoes all the time, and like you were saying that different people were going to bubble up to the surface when they wind up doing so, simply because they knew all the personalities, and the fact one of the toughest things to do was how to handle these personalities.
Yeah.
And that was how to put them in their place. And so like Wally Carbo, I got along with Wally Carbo with par excellence. I got along with most of the promoters wherever I went, and so whether it was down south or God knows where, but I always got along with these people, and this was all stuff that I learned from my dad. My dad would say, just keep your mouth shut and watch what goes on. They'll reveal who they are as to what power play they've got, and then you just over as time goes by, they'll notice that you noticed,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you want. Those are little trump cards that you'll always have in your hand. So
yeah, I know myself as a fan. I've read a lot of stories about guys like Bob Roop and others who were brought in as legitimate shooters to keep people in line. You know, I don't know if those are exactly true or not, but I have heard many accounts where if a guy didn't want to do good business, you know, by laying down for somebody one week or whatever, you were matched up with Roop or somebody like that the next time out, and you was embarrassed in front of a whole bunch of fans, you know.
Yeah.
The next time.
And this is what promotion could do, and this is because they all had their little group of people, their policemen they used to call them, and so this was now somebody like Ray, he didn't want to have any real strong bullshit. I mean, he wanted everything to be copacetic and smooth and nice and congenial, and everybody have a good time and work your butt off and give the people what they want, and that was you know, I mean, his business itself. Once the bell rang, it was hard enough just to go out there and to make all of this work. In fact,
well, I can imagine, considering you have these championship matches that might have a 1 hour time limit, and you're dealing with big, strong men, you know, and you're throwing each other around, you're trying to put on a good performance. I imagine it's tiresome enough, let alone having to deal with people wanting to stray away from the script, you know.
Well, it's not even so much that they stray away from the script. No, they want to show their wares.
Mm-hmm.
They want the whole audience to take and be enthralled with them. What you got to do is you got to stir up what you've got into this cooking bowl, this big metal pot that you're stirring everything in, and it winds up being a scenario. You can't displease certain people. And, I mean, you had the Morris Siegels, you had the Stanley Blackburns, you had Paul Bosch's, and you had all these people at different levels of promotion who had it, and then they held things together because they were the ones who were walking in and out of the box office all the time. And the thing was, there was a mental chess game that was going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that everybody wanted to know. They wanted to make sure that that everything was going to be copacetic as best as could be predicted. You know. So it was truly a gigantic chess game that was going on continuously.
Yeah, I can understand what you're coming from now on that point. Now, there have been many articles and radio interviews with a lot of the top stars from the 70s and 80s as of recently, and a lot of them have been doing shoot interviews pretty much on some of their old partners and everything. Myself, personally, I don't know exactly what to think about it. I think it's actually rather interesting in a way. But you mentioned a lot of people not being team players, you know, or people needing to be wrangled in, and that they wanted all the attention for themselves. Would you consider Hulk Hogan to be one of them people in that category?
Most definitely. I mean, but mind you, I mean, he was someone who came along at a certain period of time, and so everybody used him as best as they saw possible, and that's what you did whenever you had a talent that came along. Like the guy that was some of the more character type people, like the Blimp, or who else? Like you mentioned, kind of Ken Patera, but that was a legitimate strong man. What do you do with them? How do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And still, it's Ken Patera, the strong man. You've got a machine gun mouth, Bobby Heenan. How do you control him? What's the procedure you want to use? You have to live with this guy. You got to pay him. And who do you team him up with? Who can work best with him? And who can he work best with? Coming back from the other side. So was Hogan one of them types that it was hard for him to work with everybody because he had that type of mentality? Okay. Yeah.
Because everything I have ever read and heard interviews of people, they said there never has been a man who was as self-absorbed or as selfish in this business who threw a lot of wrestlers underneath the bus for his own gain than Hulk Hogan. In my personal opinion, I was a fan of his as a child, but as I've grown up and learned more about the business, I actually don't know if he's even a good human being in a way because of the things he has done.
Yeah, you're right on the mark. There's nothing untrue about what you said, and that's because it all depends. What was their start? How was their start? And how as far as coming into the business, and like you say, Hulk Hogan, God love him. I mean, he had to make a judgment call for himself, what he was going to do and how he was going to do it, and that was the hardest, and that was the toughest thing for almost any and all wrestlers. If they came into a territory, how do they fit? How do they fit? And where do they fit? And how can we use them to maximize our product, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Well, I can only imagine what it would have been like for Vern, who invested so much time and money and promotion into him, and he left. You know? I mean, the whole spiel where he was supposed to get the title, you dropped the title to him, and he said, well, I'm leaving anyway. That is the biggest slap in the face to a promotion that more or less made him a star. He starred in Rocky III while he was with the AWA.
Yeah.
And I think that was a horrible thing to have done, know.
Oh,
and like I said, his true colors showed out a couple of weeks back when Macho Man Randy Savage passed away. And he did a shoot interview on Savage saying Savage was one of the more horrible, awful, unwilling people to ever work with.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. This was on the internet, and it caused such a backlash that a bunch of wrestlers, like the Ultimate Warrior, came on and cussed Hogan out pretty much over it. And they said they didn't understand it because Hogan led everyone to believe they patched things up. Him and Savage did, and then he goes and does that.
Yeah.
So
I hadn't heard that. I mean that goes to show you how dumb.
Yeah.
How absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put you in a position where you'd step on anyone's toes, really admitting your personal feelings on the situation or on Hulk Hogan. But in my personal opinion, his time in wrestling, I think, should have stopped
90 seconds
in the mid 90s, really, because TNA wrestling for the most part has went down the toilet ever since he pretty much joined up with it. That's just my opinion.
Okay, I just heard a beep on my phone.
Yeah.
90 seconds. So.
Hey, Mr. Bockwinkel, Frank said back here. Yeah, we got 90 more seconds left of the live show. We don't want to go over because then our live listeners can't hear it. But Mr. Bockwinkel, I hate to cut this short. I know I hate to cut Rufus short in this case, but we really appreciate you coming back on the show. Coming on the show tonight. You have a message out there for the wrestling fans that watched you when you were active competitor and have been fans of you for all these years.
God bless them. God bless all of you. Keep coming to the wrestling matches. These younger bucks, they need your support as well. So, guys, if we get cut off here, and I don't know why or what the story is there, but we'll do another interview sometime again.
Part 2.
Well, we appreciate that, Mr. Bockwinkel, and God bless you.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your valuable time.
All righty. Thank you.
God bless.
Okay. Bye-bye.